Now I live in Paris, 19th Street of France. Question: what is your occupation? Answer: I am a retiree. Question: what are the names of your parents? Answer: my father's name is Ruh Im. My mother's name is Chai Leng. Question: how many children do you have? Answer: I have 3 children. President: thank you, Madam Civil Party. Madam Ruth Chua, as a civil party, you may make a victim's impact statement, if any, concerning the crimes which are alleged against the 2 accused, Nuon Chea and Khieu Samphan, and harms inflicted upon you during the Democratic Cambodia, resulting in your civil party application to claim collective and moral reparations for physical, material, or mental injuries as directed consequences of those crimes. Now you may proceed with the statement of your suffering and harms. Civil Party. Good afternoon, Mr. President. When we received the news that Phnom Penh was liberated, President interrupted. Madam Civil Party, please stop a moment. Madam Civil Party. Lead co-lawyers, Civil Party lead co-lawyer, do you have any questions? Madam Chua, please stop for a moment, because we would like to hear from the lead co-lawyer for Civil Party.
Thank you, Mr. President. In fact, we had planned to put questions to the civil parties, or at least to put a first question to her, so that she may start with her statement that she prepared. But I see that she can manage very well on her own, but maybe we should proceed as we had planned, because that's the way we organize ourselves with the civil parties. So good afternoon, Mr. Ross. Can you hear me?
Civil Party, yes, I can hear you.
Question: in order to allow you to begin with your testimony, I simply wanted to remind the Chamber and the parties and the public that you joined as a civil party following the disappearance of your husband Rosaron at S21, and that your civil party application was admitted by the co-investigating judges on 6 September 2010, and I would like to quote a sentence from your statement, from your application, so that the parties and the public may understand your history and the starting point of your history, and then I will let you speak. So I'm referring to document E3/5040, E3 French ERN 00563-643, Khmer 00807-822, and English 007-93826. And you say the following in your civil party application, and I quote you, and I'm going to read out what you said. In August 1976, my husband, my 3 daughters, and myself, from Paris, we traveled back to Cambodia in order to help rebuild our country that was impoverished by war. So, Ms. Ross, I would like you please to explain to the court under which circumstances you and your husband and your 3 daughters returned to Cambodia, under which circumstances your husband disappeared, because that is why you joined as a civil party, and if you could also describe to the chamber the harm and the suffering that resulted from the disappearance of your husband, harm that you experienced during the regime of Democratic Kampuchea, but also afterwards, after the end of the regime. And could you please explain how the disappearance of your husband affected your life until today? So I'm going to let you speak. I know that you have a lot to share with the chamber, and I will sit down.
Yeah.
Civil party, thank you. My family and I returned to Cambodia on 6 August 1976. When we arrived at Po Chentong, we were disappointed because I did not see any families or people coming to receive us at the airport. And when we traveled along the road, it was quiet. I felt worried. I was sad all the way until we were dropped at K Office 15. At K Office 15, I saw friends, especially 2 elder men, whom I met a few months before he returned to Cambodia. I saw them, their physical body were very thin, and they wore old torn clothes, and their appearance looks very upsetting to me. When they saw us, they smiled dryly at us, expressing through their facial experience I could see their suffering. A little while later, I saw my sister, who was also in that office. My sister entered the country 6 or 7 months before me. She also smiled at me, but that was an unusual smile. It reflected pain and suffering in her. Immediately I saw her, I asked her whether she met our parents and our relatives. She shook her head and said that she did not meet any one of them. And at K15, that we spent about 1 month there, we were relocated to Talay. At that time, I was very sad. I never thought that my country would plunge into that situation of perpetual quietness. And when Angka relocated us to Talai camp, my family, along with my children, worked separately. One day, while we were working, the chief of Talai camp's office came to tell my family to prepare our luggage because we would be sent out by Lamprata, and the Lamprata was waiting for us. At that time, I saw another man who was also my friend, and some other people whom I did not know. And as for my family, which included 5 members, and each of us carried a luggage of clothes, we could not get inside that small car. The head of the office told us that some of us would go later on.
ខ្ញុំឃើញ
Later on, I saw a person named Jin Lane, whose name also appeared later on at the tool slide. My body trembled, and I thought back to the time that if we could fit into that vehicle, then the 5 of us would have been put in a tool slide. However, this information I learned later. By mid-November 1976, Angka once again relocated my family to Bang Trobai. There, the physical appearance of my husband became worse. He became even more emaciated, and his health got worse. That's due to insufficient food, and he was a member of a team that had to work harder, that is to dismantle houses. I felt so pity for him. And in around mid-December 1976, while we were in the middle of a political study session at Bang Trobai, my husband rushed to me to tell me that he was assigned by Angka to perform a duty, and I asked where he was assigned to, and he told me that it was a secret and Angka did not tell him where he would go. And before he left, he advised me to work harder, to look after myself, and to look after our children. And he said that don't worry, that we would meet again very soon. I felt so pity upon hearing those words from my husband, and I expected to see him again soon. At that stage, I was so worried since he was separated from me. I felt so lonely. However, I also had an expectation that he would be assigned to work in a new place and that he would be fed sufficiently, and that the food there was more abundant than where we had, and the work was not that harder comparing to his current assignment, that is to break rocks and to dismantle houses. However, in reality, it was different. His last words that we would meet again, never realized it had gone with the wind. My feeling after that was unsettling. I was still hoping to see my husband again. However, from one day to the next, he never reappeared. There was no signs that he would appear. One day, a man came to the camp on a motorbike, that is to a motorbike camp, and I heard people saying that he was Ieng Sari's secretary. I tried to go and see him to ask him about my husband, and he told me that don't worry, Onka will reunite husbands and wives after he fulfilled his assigned duty. And I had hoped again upon hearing that, and I kept on waiting and waiting while I was working. And every time there was a movement of vehicle entering the camp, I tried to see whether my husband returned. I kept waiting and waiting, but in my mind I became more worried. And I kept on working hard along with other people in the camp. And by February 1977, my children and I, along with other people, were relocated by Onka to settle in at the Dai Krahom area. We were put on a motorboat at night time to travel to that area. And my fear became even worse. And that because I felt that I would be even put more distant between my husband and I. I still believe that he would be assigned to work at the Pojintong, since formerly he was the director of Pojintong Airport before he went for a doctoral study in France. And at the Krahom, I tried to work as hard as other workers, and I never expressed my sorrow through my expression. Sometimes while I was clearing grass at the beans plantation, I heard the sound of a plane flying over, and upon hearing that, my tear dropped. Since it reminded me of the time that we were together, that we were on a plane together, occasionally at Dai Krahom, the chief of the camp called some people whose husbands were separated to be relocated out of the office. And among other people, I felt happy for them since we believed that they were being sent to reunite with their husbands, and I did not know when my turn would come, or when Angka brought him back to me. I felt rather hopeless because some other people were sent out to reunite with their husbands while I was still waiting for my husband to return. And my feeling became even more unsettling by that time. Then I decided to ask the director of the Dai Krahom camp as to when I would be allowed to go out to meet with my husband. The response given to me was the same as the response given to me while I was at the Bang Trabai camp. The chief said, "Don't worry, sooner or later I would be reunited with my husband by Angka." It was the same response. The same response that I received while I was at Dai Krahom as well as at Bang Trabai, and I kept on waiting and waiting. And the concern and the worry remained with me all the time. And once in a while at the Dai Krahom camp, a vehicle would arrive with some people, and every time I felt excited that I would see my husband. My children, they were also anxious to meet their father. But every time when everybody got off the vehicle, there was no sign of my husband. And the worry lingered on with me constantly. And while I was at Dai Krahom, my younger sibling contracted malaria. And she was always carried by people to be treated. She was ridden with malaria while at the same time she was pregnant. The scene was so miserable. However, later on she delivered her baby. And it was a cesarean delivery, although there was no hygiene involved in the operation. Sometimes I felt a bit relief upon seeing my youngest daughter, who was placed in a children's unit and who secretly ran to see me. And sometimes she came with some food and fruit that she was given at the children's unit, and she gave me the food. And the children's unit, they were fed with more food than at our location. And in 1978, we were transferred by Angka from the Krahom back to Bang Trobait. So that was the second time that I was at Bang Trobait. The first time we were all united together, but for the second trip back to Bang Trobait, we were alone without the presence of my husband. And we lived there for nearly a month. That is for the first trip. And for the second return to Bang Trobait, it reminded me of the first time that we arrived at Bang Trobait, that we arrived together with my husband. But he was not around for the second trip to Bang Trobait. Again, I felt so lonely, and the sadness and the concern that remained with me all the time. And the living condition in the camp was miserable. And I questioned myself, how could I left France, where we lived comfortably, to come to live in a miserable condition? I was thinking of a lot of things. That I also were separated from my parents and relatives. How come my life became so miserable? And by January 1979, when UN troops liberated Phnom Penh, those soldiers fled away. And that was the time that I, along with my younger children, as well as my younger sister and her family, remained living in Phnom Penh for a period of time. I was living with my 3 children like a widow, and hopes to see my husband disappeared. I tried to collect myself, to do everything for the sake of the future of my children. Then the Ministry of Education invited me to attend a study session to learn how to read the Khmer language. And I was thinking that the war had just ended. How could the people think about education, about reading the letters? What we were all thinking was how to survive, how to feed ourselves. And while I was at that political school, allow me to say that it was a political school, the trainer took us to visit a genocidal museum of tool slaying. While I was there, I walked around visiting each room, seeing those torture instruments. I saw a lot of things there, and I do not want to describe them again. And finally, I went to a room where photos of prisoners were displayed. That was the times that my pulse was rising. I tried to screen every single photo displayed. And I saw amongst those photos some people that I knew. And finally, I saw a photo of my husband. It was there, and I wanted to cry out loud. I almost fainted. However, there was a voice telling me not to cry and to collect myself. I then regained my strength. And from that day onward, I told myself that I could not live in a country in such a condition. And that I had to do my best for the future of my children, since they no longer had a father, and they relied entirely on me as their mother. I had to try everything in order to feed my children. Everybody looked sad after the visit to the place, and in particular I became worse. I no longer had any hope, and I made my decision then that I had to migrate somewhere or to France. The interpreter cannot hear the statement properly.
មានខ្លាំងណាស់បុយខ្ញុំបានទៅបារាំងនឹងខែតុលាឆ្នាំ1980ខ្ញុំមកនឹងក៏បានចាត់ចែងស្រាក់ស្វែងរកបានផ្ទះនៅ
Monsieur le Président.
Yes, lead caller, you have the floor.
We don't have any more interpretation into French at any rate.
I think it was because the quality was so bad. The transmission quality is extremely bad, so I guess that's for the technical people.
President, there is a technical problem with the internet connection, and please wait a few minutes since a new connection will be established.
Monsieur le Président.
Yes, Mr. President. If you would authorize me, perhaps I would like to ask Mrs. Ross to conclude her presentation and to leave the floor open to the other parties, perhaps to show her the photo of her husband that she attached to her civil party application. Mrs. Ross, I hope that we will have the technical capability to show you this document on the screen. You attached to your civil party application E3/5040 of a photo of your husband, and with your permission, Mr. President, we would like to show this photo on the screen at ERN 00807-825.
Yes, your request is granted.
De notre côté, a priori, nous avons...
We believe that for our side, we have done what is necessary.
Peut-être pour avancer...
Perhaps to move forward, I can ask you a question. We'll proceed in this way. Mrs. Ross, you attached to your civil party application a photograph. Oh, yes, there it is. We see it. I hope that you can see it on the screen. Can you identify your husband on the photo that you see on the screen?
The photo of the man on the second row, and counting from the left, there was a photo with a white patch displayed on the shirt. So I refer here to the second photo on the second row. That is second photo from the left. That is the photo of my husband.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you. I would like to show you another document. It is a list of prisoners from S21. And I have it here, the list E3/9853. And with your permission, Mr. President, we will put it onto the screen so that the civil party can indicate if she recognizes the name of her husband. E3/9853.
Yes, you may proceed.
Madame Ross, sur cette liste, vous voyez...
Mrs. Ross, on this list we see a series of names. The names of persons who came from France. Do you recognize the name in number 6?
I do not see that list.
Vous ne la voyez...
You don't see it on the screen?
Yes, now I see it. The name is Ruth Saren.
នៅក្នុងរបាមមួយដែលមាន ទាត់
and the name is highlighted. It's her Jamran's name, and of course that is my husband's name.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you. On this list, it is indicated that your husband entered S21 on 12 December 1976. That is to say, a few weeks after the last time you saw him at Bông Trabek. So what does this information mean to you? You who are hoping to see him again all the way until the end of the regime, and all the way until that day in 1979 when you saw his photograph at S21.
ចាអត់មានអីទៀតទេឃើញចុងក្រោយ
I last saw him when I realized that he was at S21. I had no more hope because it was the place where people were brutally executed. I could not imagine how harm and suffering and torture inflicting upon him before his death, because the equipments I saw at the prison, they were cruel, brutal equipments. When I saw his photo, I imagined about the torture and suffering inflicting upon him. I did not witness it myself, but I could draw the conclusion from the equipments I saw at the prison.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Ms. Ross. I am done with my questions, and I will give the floor to my colleague from the Co-Prosecution Office.
President, thank you, Council, and the floor is given to the Co-Prosecutor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Good afternoon, Ms. Ross-Choufsi. I have a few questions to put to you. I won't be that long because we do not have that much time. My first question is, since when were you in France with your husband? How long had you spent in France with your husband before you decided to return to Cambodia on 6 August 1976? How many years had you been living in France then?
ខ្ញុំ
Answer. I met him in 1972 and we remained with each other until 1976. So it was 4 years in total that we spent together.
You said earlier that he was the director of Pochentong Airport or of the airline. Why did he leave Cambodia to go to France? You spoke about studies. But was he also going to play a role within that airline company in France?
ចាពេលនោះគាត់
At that time, he received a scholarship from the Phnom Penh government to pursue his study. To get a PhD in aviation in France.
So beforehand, he had worked for the Khmer Republic and he received a scholarship. During his stay in France, did he take any distance vis-à-vis the Khmer Republic regime, and did he start frequenting communist militants in Paris?
ចិត្តទេគាត់អត់មានផ្ដាច់
No. When he was in France, he finished his study. Then he worked in an aviation company. It was Air Cambodia and Air France. He worked with that company. He worked with that company in France. He represented the Khmer Aviation Company.
What convinced your husband and yourself to return to Cambodia, whereas he had been working for the regime that the Khmer Rouge were fighting? Wasn't it a risky proposition? Why did you decide, therefore, to return to Cambodia?
ពេលដែលដឹង
When we learned that Phnom Penh fell, we hoped that our country would be peaceful again. So he had the intention to return to our country to help rebuild the country, because our country had been battered by the civil war. So when he lived in a progressive country in France, he intended to return back to the country to help rebuild the country so that the country would be progressive like other advanced countries.
Did he ever meet Yang Sari in Paris during the period before he decided to return to Cambodia?
គាត់មិនបានជួប
He did not meet him personally.
Vous avez décrit
You described your arrival at the airport and your disappointment. When you set foot in Cambodia, did you still enjoy rights and freedoms as previously?
ពេលចុះ
When we disembarked the plane, we had no rights to move anywhere. We were put in K Office 15. It was like a detention center. We had no freedom to go anywhere outside that office.
During your stay at K15 at Calais and then at Bung Trabek, did you ever attend political training sessions with your husband that were taught by Khmer Rouge cadres, and I'm thinking in particular about Yang Sari or Kilsampon?
នៅទីណាចានៅ
Which place are you referring to? Was it at K15 or at Bang Trabai?
I was speaking about the different places, in fact. So, were you ever obliged to attend political training sessions with your husband in these different places?
នៅ
At Bang Trabai, my husband attended a meeting at Bang Trabai. For other places, we did not meet any upper Angkar. We met only the chiefs of in charge of the place.
You spoke about the fact that you found your sister again at Bong Trebek or at K15. So was this Buni Ong Tong Hun's wife?
ចាប្រកាសណាស់
Yes, that's correct.
And when your husband was taken away, you said that was in the middle of a training session or a meeting. Do you know if other people were taken away at the same time?
ចា
Yes, there were some who were taken along with him.
I would like to read out an excerpt of Ong Tong Hung's book, indexed E3/1713 at English page 00785804. In French, it's on page 140. That is to say 00288019, and in Khmer 00831182-83. It's at the end of chapter 5, and he says the following. He speaks about the speech given by Phum, P-H-U-M, who Phum called other names: Rosarin, Phum David, Mok Sung Kun, and Chuk Meng Mao. These people must leave. Ankar needs them. End of quote. So, do these different names ring a bell? Phum David, Mok Sung Kun, and Chuk Meng Mao. Do they mean anything to you?
ឈ្មោះ
The name that I remember the most was Chuang Meng Mao.
Est-ce que
Do you know if he survived the Khmer Rouge regime?
I do not know.
je vais devoir
I'm going to have to complete my question soon. There are 5 other documents from S21 on which your husband's name appears, aside from the document that was mentioned by Marie Guiraud. I'd like to mention one single document because it provides complementary information. It's document E3/2285. It is a list that is entitled in English,
names of prisoners who were smashed on 18th of March 1977.
and this list is signed by Hoare from S21 on 19 March 1977. And at English page 00873361 and at Khmer page 00009182 at number 56 we see Rosarin's name appear, alias Mao, who came from France, and his job was airline company manager, arrival date 12 December 1976. And here we see the execution date 18 March 1977. So did you already have that information when you went to S21?
លោកចង់ខ្ញុំមិនទាន់
I did not get your question fully. You mentioned that his name was brought into S21 and he was smashed on 18 March 1977. So that was the date I heard from you.
Oui, c'est bien.
That's indeed the case. There is a document from S21 that mentions this. So, had you already learned this information before? And furthermore, we see the alias, Mao. Was this a name that was used at one point in time to call your husband?
ចាមិត្តភ័ក្តិ
Answer. Yes, his friends during the former regime call him Mao. Yeah, that's what I heard from his friends calling him.
Dernière question.
Last question. At Bung Trabek, when you returned for the second time, did certain people live there, and or people who were living there who disappeared and who you never saw again? In particular, people whom you knew personally. And if so is the case, can you tell us who?
When I came for the second time, I did not know who else died.
Je vous remercie beaucoup d'avoir répondu.
Thank you very much for having answered my questions. I will stop here. Thank you very much.
President, thank you, co-prosecutor. Now I give the floor to the defense counsel for Nguyen Chi. If you have any question to put to the civil party, and you have 15 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, Madam Civil Party. I have a few questions that I would like to put to you today. Let me start by asking you if you know a person named Sung Sikun. Sung Sikun.
ខ្ញុំធ្លាប់ឮឈ្មោះហ្នឹងតែខ្ញុំអត់បានស្គាល់
Yes, I heard about the name, but I did not know that person.
Then let me only read something to you what he said about your husband, and then the only question that I would have for you is to react to what he says. Mr. President, I'm referring to document E3/1716, Khmer ERN 008-24620, French 002-90701, English 008-26569. He says about your husband, and I quote, also, like me, Rosarin had been a supporter of Son Ngoc Tan, a pro-Japanese nationalist leader and an anti-royalist. Whilst he was friendly towards Cambodian progressive, he remained a pro-Tanist for a very long time. And in fact, he even collaborated with the Lon Nol Republican government after 1970. Based on Khmer political lexicon at the time, he could be classified as a progressive nationalist or as a pink End of quote. Is that something that would be accurate, what Sung Si-kun is saying about your husband?
I never listened to Sekun's statement.
I understand, but what was your husband a quote-unquote supporter of Son Ngoc Tam?
I do not know about his past.
And did you know anything about your husband collaborating with quote-unquote Lon Nol Republican government after 1970?
Cha.
Yes, he worked during the Republic regime of Lon Nol government.
Let me move on because of the time. Do you know someone else who was in Bang Tebek together with you and who has been the Minister of Foreign Affairs in Cambodia for a long time, until April of this year, Hor Nam Hong? Do you know him, and is it correct that he was also in Bang Tebek while you were there?
Cha, but
Yes, that's correct. When I was at Bang Trabai, Hao Nam Hong was the chief of the Bang Trabai office.
And do you know what he did as a chief? What was his what was his function as a chief?
He was the chief. He divided the assignments among groups. That's what I knew. So he was responsible for dividing the assignments among groups.
Was he also a prisoner, or was he someone who was in charge as a chief?
He was not a prisoner.
Do you know whether he had any role in the decision to send your husband from Bang Tebek to S21?
I do not know.
Do you know whether he had any other role in the sending of prisoners to S21?
I do not know.
My final question, in terms of hierarchy, you said he was a chief. Was he one of the highest chiefs, or were there people on top of him in the hierarchy who had a higher function, or was he one of the top chiefs?
I do not know clearly about his functions. I only heard about his name at the Bang Trabai office.
Do you know whether in 1979 or 1980 he was accused of being the accomplice of Ieng Sary?
I do not know anything about that matter.
Thank you very much, Madam Civil Party.
President, thank you, Council. Now I would like to give the floor to the Defense Counsel for Mr. Khieu Samphan. You may now proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. A few very short questions. Good afternoon, Ms. Ross. One request for clarification in relation to what you told the Chamber today. You said that at one point in time you tried to obtain information about your husband from the secretary, I think that's the word you used, from Ieng Sary's secretary. So do you remember Ieng Sary's secretary's name?
People told me that his name was Sao Hong. I don't know whether it's true or not, because this was the name I learned from other people, that the person's name was Sao Hong.
And who are the people who gave you this name? And did you know this person before?
I heard about the name, but I did not know the face of the person.
Vous ne le connaissiez pas.
You didn't know him before? And did you see him one time or several times? This person called Song Ong.
I saw him once at Bang Trabai.
Monsieur le Président, je n'ai pas d'autres.
Mr. President, I have no further questions. Thank you, Madam Ross, for having answered my questions.
President, thank you, Council. And And Madam Civil Party, toward the end of your statement of impact and suffering, do you wish to make any further statement, or do you wish to put questions to the accused through the President of the Chamber? If you wish to do so, you may proceed. Civil Party. Yes, I have a statement to make. The purpose of describing my life events is that, in fact, I had many questions that I'd like to ask Ieng Sari, and it seems that the Khmer Rouge Tribunal proceeded rather slowly, and as a result, the accused died before he was even tried. It was Ieng Sari himself who went on a propaganda for Khmer expatriates living overseas to return to Cambodia to rebuild our war-torn country. And he made that appeal to Khmer living overseas to return. I feel a bit relieved after I have made my statement. When I returned to Cambodia at the time, my purpose was also to meet with my parents, but in the end I did not, and I did not even know where they were buried, if they were buried at all. And my second purpose is to convey messages to the younger generations that they should learn from this experience and not to fall into the tricks employed by politicians who always relies on cheating people, that they have to judge the situation and should be informed of their decision. And from my observations, the current situation in Cambodia, I could observe that murderers, and allow me to use that word, murderers can travel freely inside the country. And some of them even hold senior positions in the government. And this culture of impunity obstructs the peaceful living of the general population, and that also put an obstacle to their self-movement of freedom. And as a result, our economic situation does not improve. Tourists are scared to visit an unsafe country like our country. And recently, Dr. Kamley was murdered. President interrupts. Madam Civil Party, you are here to make a statement of harm and suffering regarding your experience, or you can put questions to the accused regarding that. Do you wish to make any questions to the accused? Civil party, yes, I do. I want to know that in 1975, when Ieng Sari appeals to Khmer living overseas to return to Cambodia under the pretext of returning to rebuild the country, did they know that the majority of Khmer expatriates returning from overseas killed at the Tours line? And my second question to the two accused, that is Nuon Chea and Khieu Samphan, is this: due to held a very senior position in the leadership of the Democratic Cambodia regime, and what is your view on the killing of millions of Cambodian people? And what was your responsibility for that? President, thank you, Madam Civil Party. And Madam Chu Si, the Chamber wishes to inform you that on the proceedings on the 8th of January 2015, in response to the questions of the Chamber, the co-accused reaffirms their position to exercise their rights to remain silent. Also, during that hearing, the Chamber noted that the co-accused maintains their position to remain silent unless and until such time the Chamber is informed otherwise by the co-accused or their counsels. Also, during that proceeding, the Chamber instructed the co-accused and their counsels to inform the Chamber in a timely and efficient manner should the accused resolve to waive the right to remain silent and be willing to respond to questions by the bench or relevant parties at any stage of the proceedings. On the 1st August 2016, the defense counsels for Nuon Chea and Khieu Samphan informed the Chamber that the two accused still maintains their position and exercise their rights to remain silent. That is document E421/1.1 and E421/1.2. And Madam Civil Party, the Chamber is grateful of your testimony, that is your statement of harm and suffering that you claimed you suffered under the Democratic Cambodia regime in relation to S21 Security Center. It is now concluded, and due to excused, and the Chamber will adjourn the proceeding now and resumed tomorrow, that is Friday 12 August 2016, commencing from 9 o'clock in the morning. For tomorrow, the Chamber will hear key document presentation by the co-prosecutors and the lead co-lawyers for civil parties. This information is for the parties and the general public. Security personnel are instructed to take the two accused, Nuon Chea and Khieu Samphan, back to the detention facility and have them return to attend the proceedings tomorrow, Friday 12 August 2016, before 9 o'clock. The court is now adjourned.